Hello, and thank you for joining me on this journey of learning and growing our leadership. This is very important, especially in this decade, in this era when there is chaos everywhere, there's confusion everywhere. Learning and growing our leadership has become a very high ticketed commodity. Like always, you are once again invited to support this channel following three simple steps. Hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell so you can be informed of new episodes. Like, comment, and share all the videos. I want you to also share the channel with your network to help us increase the awareness and spread the news all over the globe. Thank you for your support. It will go a long way to help us reach our goal. This episode is the introduction of a series that is near and dear to my heart because it is dedicated to my continent, Africa. Yes, in this season, all roads are leading to Mama Africa with a series titled The Pathway to a Transformed Africa. And today's topic of focus is why leadership matters. I want to quickly take a moment before I dive in to just welcome our new subscribers and the existing supporters of this channel, those of you who are watching, liking, sharing, and announcing the channel to other people and also sharing our videos. Thank you very much. We are so grateful to you. Thank you. And as you may already be aware, Gates of Transformation is a platform where we bring content to equip leaders and citizens of nations with tools to transform your societies and nations. If this speaks to you, you are in the right place at the right time. Welcome on board. Every episode that comes to you from Gates of Transformation is highly important. However, what makes this episode special isn't only that it is dedicated to the African continent, but also that it will dig deep into the after effects of colonialism. I believe that a lot of people will be interested in discussing or learning or even being reminded of the after effects of colonization. And we are going to get prepared. I want you to get prepared. I want you to get your heart aligned with what is about to come, to get your mind intact in the right place. Because when you access this channel, when you come across this channel, you are in the right place at the right time. So get yourself together because we are going to that deep today. We are going that deep because after studying colonialism and being vested in learning about the African continent, I mean, learning about the successes, the struggles, the hurdles, and day-to-day challenges in each nation, I came to accept that the African continent as a whole is faced with a dilemma that needs to be exposed, it needs to be acknowledged, and it needs to be confronted. Yes, I don't know if you agree with me, but that's where I am. I believe that something happened at the time of colonization. At the time of colonization, something happened that we need to revisit in this episode. Listen, I don't know what you're thinking and what you believe, but hear me out. This is what I have learned, researched, and believe. That even though colonialism still has deep emotional and psychological effects, I strongly believe that there is another level that goes deeper than being denied opportunities or abused physically. That's just what I believe. There is another level. And that deeper level, in my view, is the unaddressed spiritual effect of colonialism. We always talk about the psychological effect. We talk about the physical effect. We even talk about the economical effect. But we tend to neglect the spiritual effect of colonialism. I want you to just think about it. Being removed from one's home to be forcefully relocated to another place attracts a level of trauma that emanates from the spirits and souls of the people and can only be addressed and healed by exposure, acknowledging, and deliberately pursuing healing. We have to come to that place where we acknowledge all the effects of colonialism, we accept it, and then we deliberately, consciously, intentionally pursue healing. That's the only way the continent can begin to move forward. You see, I want African citizens, African leaders, and the descendants of Africa to hear me and hear this, what I'm about to say. I have learned that being delivered doesn't equate to freedom. And changing leaders or locations doesn't automatically yield transformation. Hear me out. This is what I believe, and I know you will agree with me. I want to even take a moment to even expound on what I just said further. After years and years of slavery, Africans were declared free and nations granted independence by the colonial masters, which included even passing the leadership baton of the colonized nations to indigenes. That happened. Listen, I wasn't born when the nations were granted independence. I wasn't born yet. But I can only imagine how colorful the celebrations were, knowing Africa and being born and raised in Africa. I could only imagine. I can only imagine today how colorful the celebrations were. I can picture the drumming, the dancing, the feasting, with the spirit of Mama Africa consuming the atmosphere. I can just imagine patriotic songs were written and melodies filling the entire atmosphere in celebration of independence. What the colonial masters did was incredible. Incredible to have released the continent and released the nations from slavery. And it is applaudable, no doubt, because Africans deserve freedom. However, I believe it was all superficial, just because they failed to address the emotional and spiritual trauma that lurked in the hearts of the people. The people were freed physically, but still imprisoned mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. And I think that is where I have an issue. Let me drive the points home by sharing with you a story. I love stories because I learn so much from them. So even when I read scriptures, I dig out the lessons in the stories of the people featured. That's how I got to connect so deeply to the greatest slavery story ever told, in my view. And it is about a group of people who were voluntarily relocated from their land, Canaan, to another land, Egypt, during a time of severe famine in Canaan. You know, even if you are very familiar with the story, you would agree with me that just the purpose of the manner in which they relocated may have even planted seeds of insecurity in them. They moved because they depended on another nation to give them food that their nation couldn't provide. They lived in a nation. There was famine in that nation. Another nation prepared so well for the famine that they had food for their people and also to take care of others in the surrounding nations. That in itself is a cause for insecurity. Anyway, they moved. They settled in comfortably. And after several years of prosperity in Egypt, and after all the forefathers had passed on, the tables turned against the Canaanites. I want you to listen to me very carefully, even if you're familiar with the story. Just listen to me. Yes, they went from swimming in prosperity with cattle, with land, with all kinds of houses and wealth. They went from swimming in prosperity in a foreign land to becoming slaves. At that point, they lost all their dignity. And even when their little children, babies who weren't the ones laboring all day for the slave masters, they also became emotionally broken and mentally traumatized beyond what you and I can comprehend. Years later, their cry for freedom reached freedom and deliverance from slavery reached the heavens. And a son of the soil was empowered and appointed by God to free them from slavery. I'm just recounting the story. I wasn't there, but I believe in the story, and I'm recounting it to you. You can imagine the atmosphere on that day. On the day they were being freed and led out of Egypt. It may have been like what happened in Africa when Africa gained independence. The nations that were colonized started to gain independence. They were joyful. They sang songs of praises to their God. They were hopeful of a brighter future. To them, slavery had ended because they were departing. But within a few days' journey out of Egypt, it became clear to them, very clear to them, and to everyone who ever read the story, that a change of location doesn't translate to freedom. Yes, it doesn't. You know, surprisingly, that journey was more difficult than I could ever imagine. I could not even fathom the outcome of that journey. It became very, very difficult. Every time they were faced with challenges, the people looked back at where they left. They cried to depart Egypt. They mourned and moaned to be delivered from Egypt. But when they started the journey and they encountered wilderness, they started to look back at where they left. In fact, they frequently confronted their leader with very hard questions. Questions like, are you sure God spoke to you to come and get us out of Egypt? Why did you bring us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? They were not friendly with their leader. They were very upset at some point in the journey. Some of them even told him, though we were slaves in Egypt, we had beds to lay on after a long day's walk. But here we are in the wilderness, we have no beds. They told the leader, we were fed by our taskmasters. We had food. Remember, they went to Egypt to begin with because of food. And now they were saying, we were fed in Egypt by the taskmasters. By the way, they told him, we even remember the fish we ate in Egypt. It was so delicious. It's like the ocean and the rivers in Egypt. They produced fish that was different from all other fish that they've ever had. They cried about the fish. It was very tasteful, so delicious. Not only that, they even they told him also that we also enjoy the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Can you imagine? People that are being freed from slavery are looking back and crying and craving for cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. Now, if you are like me, I was frustrated the first time I read the story. I was very frustrated because I just couldn't understand why anyone would choose food over freedom. But then it dawned on me that they were delivered from slavery, but they were never freed from slavery. There is a difference between freedom and deliverance. They were delivered from slavery and brought out of Egypt, but they were never freed from slavery. I'll explain that in just a moment. That's a very important point to note, because sometimes we may fail to realize that the trauma that they attracted had gotten so deep that a change of location or appointment of a leader alone could not heal it. It was deeper than that. I believe that you're flowing with me. I believe that you're enjoying the episode. I believe that you enjoyed that story. And as the story reaches its climax, I want you to please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and even share the channel with someone or people in your network so they can join us in this conversation and they can help us to get the message out to a wider audience. Thank you very much if you've done that already. And I encourage you, if you haven't done so, to go ahead and help us share, comment, like, subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. Now, let me get back to the story. When this group of people departed from the land of slavery, they were promised a home. They were promised restoration of a home where they will experience fruitfulness and rest, because they have been in slavery for decades. For such a long time, they have been in slavery. So they were promised this place of fruitfulness and rest. But the journey to that desired place demanded much more than they were prepared to give. Sometimes we verbalize our desire for freedom, but we may not be ready for what it takes to really experience freedom. So after a prolonged journey of stress, of uncertainty, pain, and loss of lives, their trauma and insecurity had gotten so deep that it distorted their entire reasoning. Yes, their reasoning was now distorted. Let me tell you, even though the generations of elders passed on during the journey, the psychological trauma that they experienced was passed down from generation to generation. Yes, this is why I'm talking about the spiritual effects, after effects of colonialism. We always talk about the mental, the psychological. Those are very important. But there is a spiritual aspect. The aspect that even an unborn baby would have already inherited trauma before they come into the world. That is a spiritual transaction. Anyway, time elapsed and the remnant arrived at the border. Those who were left after a lot of them died and some babies were born and all of that happened. Now, those who were left and alive at the time arrived at the border of the land that they were promised. As was the tradition in those days, a few men were sent ahead to go and spy the land so they can strategize their invasion. Let me pause there and tell you something. That place that you're desiring to go already has occupants. That place that you desire your nation to reach already has occupants. And in order for you to occupy that place, you have to invade and in some cases even evacuate the occupants so you can occupy. That's what needed to happen here. They were promised a land of rest, a land of fruitfulness, a very prosperous nation, but it was occupied. So they needed to go in and strategize their invasion to take over the place. I want you to listen very carefully. When the spies returned to give their report, some of them said to their leader, "We will not be able to invade that land. We will not be able to go up against them. These people that we saw, they are stronger than us. The men we saw are like giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes." I hope you caught that. The last part of that statement got my attention. By them saying we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, it indicated that they were not necessarily powerless. But that's how they perceived themselves. And that mentality alone was enough to lock them out of freedom and transformation for good. Because they believed they were powerless. They were unable. They would not be able to. This is why transformational leadership is not an option in Africa. This is exactly why. I know we have reached the climax of the story. And I know right now you were just waiting for me to get to the end. You are literally sitting at the edge of your seat asking, what next? What next? Let's go there. What's next? But this is just part one. I shared in the beginning when this channel was launched, I did share that this channel is an elephant. And we are not going to just swallow this elephant. It will be choked. We are going to eat this elephant piece by piece. So in this series, I want you to fasten your seatbelt and get ready, because there are so many other episodes coming, all tied to this series, The Pathway to a Transformed Africa. Today, I came your way just to talk about why leadership matters in the continent. And from the story that I've shared and from the spiritual effect of colonialism, we can all agree that transformational leadership is not an option in Africa. Well. I hope you have enjoyed this episode introducing the series, The Pathway to a Transformed Africa. And I promise you, we will continue in the next episode, which will come your way very soon. But until then, I ask you to keep the likes, the comments, and subscriptions going to support this channel. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.